Martin is the Managing Director for Real Estate for the Swiss Marketplaces Group. And we're going to chat about how SMG enables Swiss real estate to reach the next level of digitisation. So thank you very much.
Hi, Simon.
Great to be here.
Great
Grab
to
a
be
seat.
Here. Thanks.
Welcome to the lounge.
Morning, everybody.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today. Do you want to talk a little bit about your background first, so we understand where you're coming from and how you're thinking about the Swiss Marketplaces Group and the real estate segment?
Sorry. So basically, I'm coming originally from the financial services industry, where I was very much pushing also in transforming businesses to digital businesses, which is a typical banking industry also quite hard. And then I joined almost 8 years ago the Scout Group in Switzerland and led it as MD the ImmoScout business.
Okay, so then let's dive in a bit deeper. So tell me more about Swiss Marketplace Group. This is sort of the coming together of most of the assets in Switzerland to create a single company.
Yeah, actually it's a great startup. So we are not 1 year old, and so Swiss Marketplace Group is basically combining the Scout24 Switzerland group in Switzerland and the Takes Markets group in Switzerland. And we are active in 4 business units, so automotive, real estate, general marketplaces, and finance and insurance.
Yeah. Are there any other players left in Switzerland?
Yeah, there are. We have Comparis, we have Immobilier, we have New Home, and there are almost every month coming new portals on the market. For instance, this year ImmoWorld was launched by Helvetia Insurance in collaboration together with MoneyPark. So
okay. Let's sort of start to funnel in on the real estate segment. So let's talk about how you put these assets together, because that's always quite interesting, right? So you have these various real estate assets a year old. How are you thinking about bringing them together to capture the most value from actually putting the group together?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I think the main challenge is really to identify really the strengths of those different assets and combine then those assets to create new combined great offers for customers and consumers. But as you were saying, so bringing those groups together, it's quite a challenge. There is a manifold challenges.
So what are the key challenges that you're finding? Are there cultural challenges? Is it operational, technology, or is it everything?
It's almost everything. No, I would say the main challenges, I see them, and as I experienced in 3 different areas. So first I would call a people. So you're bringing cultures together, different mindsets.
Yeah.
So basically people were used to fight against each other all day on, and from one day to another you're best buddies to move on a common purpose forward. So to have this cultural shift, it's one element. On the other side, to put the organization together, you have everywhere duplications. So to define the right leadership team, to put first the leadership team in place and then cascade it down. So in our case, we had the first 3 months defining the leadership team and then defining the right size of the organization for the future, because you have a lot of duplications, as mentioned. This led also that we had to do a restructuring program, and in spring we had to announce and go through a mass layoff process in Switzerland. So this is more on the organizational part challenge. And then when it comes to the technical challenges, I mean, you have duplications of systems. You have systems which are not compatible to have one view. For instance, we had 2 different CRM systems with different logics, so it wasn't possible to have one single customer view. So this was a huge challenge to work with different systems, to combine somehow to get the best value out of it.
So let's take a customer perspective. So if I'm a Swiss real estate agent and I was buying subscriptions with various portals, and now they're all owned by the same company. Am I still buying subscriptions with the various portals, or am I now buying one subscription to go on multiple portals? Or how is this sort of working out?
So basically, this is a journey. So, as said, we have that different value propositions looking at Homegate and ImmoScout. So, the customers are still buying subscriptions on both brands. In the meantime, we are now in the phase of harmonizing those value propositions to move in the next coming time then to somehow a common value proposition for them. But we still use both brands because we made an initial assessment, and the savings we would have made out of it in killing one brand, decided would be stupid because they're equally strong and leaves another door open for another competitor.
Yeah, no, I was involved in when Grupo Zap and Viva Real merged. They had the same sort of issue. The two largest players in Brazil, and they went down. They started down the path of they take the Viva Real brand, the Grupo Zap, or the Zap Imovase brand, which makes a lot of sense, right? From a consumer perspective, you want to chew up as much of the oxygen as possible with your listings. But they were also then thinking about, how do I sell it to agents, right? And now the problem was Viva Real was this much money and Zap was this much money, so they were different prices. And so they tried to have teams continue to sell both products separately, but the agents, not being stupid, just went, I'm going this way, right? I'm just going to go to the Viva Real because I know you'll eventually put my listings on the other side. So how are you thinking about bringing this together? How are you thinking about making it easy for the agent?
So the thing is that we have a certain amount of, let's call it overlap customers, which are using already both brands, and then you have these non-overlap customers. So the thing we want to do is really to show the non-overlap customers the value they miss, actually, So showing them the value of the other asset more and more, and start continuing offering them the value proposition of the combined, and also continue monetizing on this.
Yeah, so I think that the underlying challenge with these is always that if I take 1 + 1, how do I make sure I get 3, not 1.5?
Exactly. Right. And I mean, the challenge will also be that overlap customers, if the non-overlap customers get a certain value out of them, they might be asked themselves, okay, is this fair? Because they pay less. So that's a challenge we have to manage.
So I think then there must be a big agent communication exercise, making sure they're comfortable, making sure they understand that it's happening in time. How do you get your sales guys? Because you said you've got these two organizations used to belting their heads together. Now they've got to be best buddies, but at the moment they're still selling two different products.
Yes, so this was actually a huge exercise to bring the group of salespeople together. So we have now a joint sales team in place, and we had to train them, because the one didn't know the other product very well, and vice versa. So we had to do a huge training exercise to bring them up to speed, that they are able to consult and to advise our customers the best.
Okay, so let's now think about where to next, right? Because I think that's an interesting question. And I want to start by, and if we can put you have put the question up, it's fantastic. Let's start with sort of, what do you expect the outcome of having the two biggest what is the expected outcome of having two of the biggest players come together? How is the market reacting? So how has the market actually reacted to it so far?
So it's always, I mean, the agents, they are very skeptical.
Yes.
Because they feel that they get even more dependent, which they don't like. So the art of this is really to show the agents that we are not here to disrupt them, but we want to support them along the journey, make them more efficient along the journey, and try to show also the value they get out of it in terms of products and innovations, because beforehand we were investing money to fight against each other. So we want to invest the money combined to get the best solutions for our agents and the industry in the future, and also to compete against the big international tech companies, which becomes also much more relevant also in Swiss market.
Okay, so then let's get onto that one in a minute. So this must create a very interesting set of opportunities for you, because a lot of energy goes at fighting against someone else. You've taken that energy and now you can focus it, on bringing the two businesses together, which you will do, over 1 or 2 years, and you'll get there eventually. How do you then think about the next stage of growth? What are the options or the opportunities that you have?
So basically our intention is, and that's basically how we see the next step of digitization in the Swiss real estate industry, and that's also why we bought the leading CRM system in Switzerland with Gazasoft, and one of the leading real estate valuation company with Yahtzee, that we want basically to offer a solution from the listing to the signed contract, basically to the transaction, to show the value to the customers and capture this value and make them more efficient. So make them feel that we support them in becoming more efficient and growing together.
Right, so this is about an end-to-end technology solution for agency in Switzerland. So you don't want to replace agency. You want them to continue to operate.
Yeah.
But you want to be the enabler of the transaction.
Exactly, because we have quite a fragmented agents market in Switzerland. So the biggest one, they can afford themselves to invest in digitized solutions. But there are many thousands of agents, they don't have the money. So we see ourselves as the ones who can support them to stay competitive in the market, but get out a fair share of this for ourselves.
Okay. So one thing is you say it sounds like you've got marketing, data, CRM, okay, which allows you to AVM models on houses to provide the right data to the agent to communicate to the buyer or the seller what the value is. Marketing to drive leads, and then I assume you're then moving into documents and closing and digital signatures and so on.
Yeah.
How do you think about lead management and those value-added tools that go on top?
What do you mean by the lead management?
So instead of, there are many solutions out there now. The lead comes in and it goes straight through the agent's email, right? And they may or may not answer it, as we saw with iVox yesterday. A lot of people don't answer. How do you then think about putting tools on top that allow you to qualify leads or automatically qualify at that next level of value?
Yeah, that's actually one of our things we are aiming to on top of that. But because we see today we are generating thousands and thousands of leads for agents, and they're not responded. And agents, they don't need 1,000 leads. What they want is the only one lead, which is important. So we see ourselves also where we can create value in qualifying leads, and also then with more qualified leads get more value out of it. Yeah, for
okay,
ourselves.
how do you think about seller leads? How are you approaching generating? Because a lot of the conversation yesterday was around, well, in Europe, there's a lot of focus on generating of seller leads, because we know that's where a lot of the value is, because because it's exclusive contracts. How do you approach that?
So that's an interesting question. So we had on Homegate and on the ImmoScout side prior to the merger already first baby steps doing with seller leads. We felt basically we didn't find right now the right mechanisms to do it in a good manner to be also profitable. I mean, it's revenue, but if you have to have all these manual processes in qualifying leads, it's not profitable. So now with the new situation, we were looking actually at the potential we have within our SMG assets, and we have on general marketplaces with Tutti and Anibis also two very strong categories in real estate where we can leverage the synergies. What I mean by that is we have a lot of private listings there for free on the sales side, which are basically seller leads. So what we want to do is to try out if we can leverage those listings more and get to a much more profitable kind of seller leads. But we see also for ourselves, if I say the next game is really from the listing to the contract, when we are speaking about the sell market, it's on top of that we are looking at the seller leads because that's the source of the whole value chain. And the one who is able to generate the seller lead is basically also the one orchestrating the value chain until the end.
Right. And this must, there's sort of a couple of interesting questions out there, right? One is, you've got all these assets across the Swiss marketplaces group. How do you really leverage that learning across them, or how do you think you will leverage the learning between them? So you talked about from a horizontal, or maybe even an automotive, how would you capture interesting ideas and apply them to the real estate space?
So it's always a matter of identifying really the strengths on the different assets and try to, okay, how could this make sense to apply this in our own journeys for consumers or for customers. And then when it comes to those synergies, it's basically all about also to take the right and fast decisions to make it happen then, and then also to manage the operational model, because often, I mean, these are different units, and if you want to make synergies happen between units, you need also to enable and somehow incentivize that people are incentivized to work together.
Do you put what I've seen work well in the past is it's almost like a separate team that sits across, and their sole job is to look for synergies and opportunities. So for example, you said you've got finance and real estate. Well, the two naturally go together. But the incentives often within the finance team are you've got this P&L or this budget to hit, and so they're just got like this, and they're just going like that. And the real estate guys are doing the same. And they theoretically get it, but it's 5% of their bonus, or it's 10% of their bonus. And so they go, you know what, it's not worth the headache to do it. And what sometimes works is that team across the top, whose job is to identify them and then work with the product managers to then start to implement cross-selling. So do you have that sort of structure, or you're reliant on everyone to play with each other nicely?
It's more the second one we have in place. And we have to think about, you know, as you were mentioning, it's very focused on P&L management. So we have to think also how we make some intercompany deals to make this happen, that really the whole organization in terms of their objectives sees the value they're creating for another unit.
Yeah, and do it at arm's length.
Exactly.
So there's real value recognized, otherwise they go, I'm going this way.
And also here, it's about mindset. It's not mine and yours, it's somehow to break through, it's ours, and our objective is to leverage the value for the whole Swiss marketplace group.
Okay, now you mentioned earlier about international players coming in. What did you mean by that?
So I think we have a lot we have a lot of players when it comes, for instance, in seller leads. We have many actors already from Germany acting in the Swiss market, and there are others to come. And we see that others are looking at the Swiss market, since it's quite an interesting market, if they could scale their business model to Switzerland.
Now, there's a question that's popped up the top here, which I don't quite understand, but maybe you will. It says, why do you allow your properties from your portals to get listed in competitor sites like Real Advisor?
So that's basically the crawling and anti-crawling game.
Okay.
So in Switzerland, that's a unique country. You have to understand that within the whole world, I think, at least in European Union, Switzerland is the only country where crawling is allowed.
Okay. So how do you turn that to your advantage? Because often people fight against something that you can't fight against. So how do you turn that to your advantage?
So it's difficult to turn it into our advantage. It's much more the game of, okay, to what extent do I allow these crawling mechanisms, and do I get some referral traffic back or not?
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, I have to somehow do to put anti-crawling mechanisms in place. So as long as you got referral traffic, you get somehow a value back out of it.
Or, I mean, just as a thought, you're the one who's monetizing the agent to get the listing. The crawlers, how are they monetizing that outcome? Through third-party ads, or?
Often there are different models in place, but as long as they don't monetize and don't hunt the same share of wallet as we do, it's not that critical.
Okay. But it'd be interesting, because I think where your advantage comes is your capacity to add value to leads.
Yeah,
right,
definitely.
And I think when we talked about the seller leads before, and you'll probably think about the buyer leads the same way, and so on. But then my last question is, how do you think about getting into the transaction or getting closer to the transaction? Because you're playing in the marketing pool, but now you've got the transaction revenue will be much larger. So how do you think of starting to capture some of that value?
So basically, by this playbook I just explained, so in putting the solution in place, basically from the listing or from the seller lead to a concluded contract, this allows us, on the way to get there, on one hand side, to create value and capture value with our customers, but on the same time, it enables us to pivot our business model in the future towards a transaction business model if we want. So that's basically a twofold win out of it, because on one hand side we can create and capture value, and on the other side we enable ourselves with that moving to a transaction where the commission pool is much higher. Not saying that we will get into the transaction itself, but at least we would have the enablement, because we have then the transparency throughout the whole process, and we have all the different tools and services in place to manage it digitally.
Yeah, so fundamentally what you're doing is you're enabling or making it much easier for the agent to do the transaction. You're taking out all the manual work and then allowing them to focus on only those moments that matter.
Exactly.
Which is the signing of a vendor, a seller, and closing of the transaction at the other end, and everything else in theory could be almost automated.
Definitely.
And then, because then the next step is just to say, well, you can work for me, right? And then
that's an option.
Yeah, and then it'll become a very large player capturing a very large pool of value.
Yeah, that's keeps us our options open with that. Yeah.
I can see where you're going. Okay, so Martin, thank you very much. I love what you guys are doing, and congratulations on pulling this off.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.